Hello and welcome. My name's Andy Crook, and I'm your host for this training topic, all about hire slow, fire fast. Every week, I try to go live on one of the 5 pillars of business as I see it. My mission is to help garage owners become more successful at business. This week, we're in the people and performance pillar, and we're looking at the recruitment process. And we're talking about hire slow and fire fast. We're going to look at what that means in an independent garage business. Hiring the right people is one of the most crucial decisions you'll ever make in business, and it's also one of the easiest to get wrong. Many garage owners feel the pressure to get someone in quickly when they're short-staffed, but a rushed hire can create a far bigger problem down the road. In this training topic, we'll dive into hire slow, fire fast. We'll discuss what it really means, how to apply it, and why mastering this mindset could be the most meaningful change that you make this year. When I first encountered the phrase hire slow, fire fast, I thought it meant spending months finding the perfect candidate, only to dismiss them at the first sign of trouble. However, some brief research revealed that some experts actually condemn this concept, and there are others that insist that it's essential for organizational success. However, I've concluded that hire slow, fire fast can be valuable advice for micro businesses like independent garages, where each team member significantly impacts the bottom line. So let me clarify what this philosophy actually means in practice, or at least my interpretation. Hire slow doesn't suggest dragging recruitment out for months, but rather preparing sufficiently to properly assess candidates through a 3-stage recruitment process. And I'll go through that 3-stage process with you in this training topic. Meanwhile, fire fast doesn't mean immediately sacking people for minor issues, but rather acknowledging incompatibility or performance problems promptly, rather than letting situations fester. The alternative, hire fast and fire slow, which is the situation most garages find themselves in, creates toxic environments where poor performers drain team morale and resources, while good employees become frustrated and even possibly leave. So let me explain how to apply hire slow and fire fast for a garage looking to recruit new talent. There's a well-known saying, and it's a prior preparation and planning prevents something poor performance. But it still amazes me the number of very low quality job adverts I see for situations vacant in the garage trade. You only have to have a quick look around Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn to find very low quality adverts. So typically what it'll say is tech wanted. And there may be a couple of pointers after that. Typically it says must be experienced or must have own tools, must have driver license, whatever it is. The type of advert. They're hardly inspiring. And who wants to work for a garage that puts so little effort into their staff? Because that's the message you're sending. Inadvertently, agreed. You probably woke up that morning and said, you know what, I just got to get another whoever, front of house, tech, valeter, whatever it was, and then you put the advert out without really much thought and consideration. And this is what hire slow means in practice. Having a recruitment and selection process that attracts the right candidates for the role. Fire fast is as much about fit as it is about setting success standards and how they're monitored. And that fit is really down to you at the very beginning of the process. So let's start this training topic with a simple question. What questions do you ask at interview to ensure a candidate is suitable for the role and the culture of your business? If you don't know what questions to ask and why you're asking them, how can you expect to find the right candidate? That's the point of this training tool. It aims to help you attract, select, and retain talent. Let's have a look at what hire slow, fire fast means for in the garages. So we talked about a 3-stage recruitment process, and the 3 stages are basically before, during, and after the interview. So let's look at those 3 stages in some detail. So what do we need to be doing before the interview. So how do we attract the right people? What sort of procedures do we need to follow? What sort of preparation we need to do? And one of the things that I've talked about a few times before, and that's detailed descriptions. Detailed job descriptions, roles and responsibilities, detailed person specifications. That's the sort of thing that we really need to understand before we start looking for someone, because we need to understand what that person's going to be expected to do, and then what sort of person we want in that role. So if we start with jobs, descriptions, roles, and responsibilities. So what we're going to outline in this document is basically, what do the wages look like? What's the holiday entitlement? What's the pension contributions? Basically, the information that forms the basis of the employment contract. So finding this information shouldn't be too onerous. But what we want to also do is, once we've got that information, and in a previous training topic, I've talked about when you've got all the roles for your business, filling out these descriptions way before you need to, or you're looking for anyone to employ, so that you know the type of people that when you go in to employ them, what sort of person it is, what sort of qualifications they need, etc., etc. So once you know that, you can then start to prepare some questions for during the interview, and prepare your questions in advance. Typical questions that you get at interview, almost generic questions that are some of the hardest to answer, or to answer, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and your weaknesses? Why have you applied for this job? Why should we employ you over any of the other qualified candidates? Now, they're very generic questions, but they are designed to elicit information from the candidate in a very particular way. And if you don't know what those questions are trying to achieve, then maybe you need to do a bit of preparation. And the next stage is the person specification. And this is basically qualifications, both essential and desired, experience, and basically outline how these will be measured and continued to be monitored during either the recruitment process, the sit-in, or during the interview. Explain the culture of the workplace and the nature of the work they will be expected to undertake. What I call this is the picky person profile. These descriptions and specifications, so the job descriptions and the person specifications, serve as a means of self-selection. The more concise, the less people fit. They also help sifting through the applications so that you only interview suitable candidates. Now, when you have both of those things, your person specification, or what I call the picky person profile, and detailed job descriptions and roles and responsibilities, if you are going to go to an agency, you can give them a very detailed list of things that are desirable, essential for your business. So let's talk about recruitment agencies and how do you find the ideal candidate? It's all too common to see, as I spoke about earlier on, a very low quality advert on social media or possibly on LinkedIn. And if you use that same philosophy or that same approach when you go to an agency, what's the chances of you getting the right kind of candidate? It's probably going to be low because you haven't put enough effort in, you haven't done enough preparation. But what about network opportunities? One of my favorite sayings is, your network is your net worth. And it's never truer when you're looking for talent. Because how much are you willing to pay for a referral? Have you even thought about it? So if a tech can add 100K or more in revenue every year, and that is every year, not just the first year, every year, what are you willing to pay to get a great one? £1,000? £5,000? £10,000? Agencies will typically charge 25% of the wages for a successful candidate. So if you're willing to use an agency, why wouldn't you use your agency, your network of people that you know, including your staff, your motor factors, the tool guy, everyone you know who's in contact with people, friends, previous colleagues, whoever who may be a suitable fit for your business. Remember, most of these people know you, they know your business, they know a little bit about your culture. They might know someone who's a better fit. Wouldn't it be a good idea to incentivize people to select people? And obviously you pay them whatever it is you would be willing to pay after their probation period. Once they're not only been identified, they've been onboarded and they're successfully bedded into your business. Wouldn't you rather give that money to a member of staff who knows someone or someone who you know rather than a faceless agency? I'm not saying agencies are all bad, but what I'm saying is if you're willing to pay them, wouldn't it be better to maybe look a little bit within your network? Just an idea. So that's the sort of stuff you need to do before. So to proceed that up a little bit, what we need to have are detailed job descriptions, roles, responsibilities, and personal specifications so that you know exactly the sort of person you're looking for and the sort of work they're going to do and the criteria that you're going to measure their suitability by. That's what that does. And then you can ask in your network, do they know anyone like that? So that's the before. Now, during the interview, what you would like to see is a multiple meeting method. And what do I mean by that? Every time you have an opportunity to have contact with a candidate, always be observing behaviors. Simple things like how do they greet other members of staff? What's their timekeeping and their presentation? Now, we don't expect everyone to turn up in a suit for a job as a mechanic because it's not that really important. But are they neat and tidy? That's what we're looking for. And what we're looking for is we want the behaviors that we observe to meet everything they said about themselves. And when we ask those questions at interview, are they consistent? Are they congruent with everything that we see? It always reminds me of the set of videos I keep seeing on social media at the moment. It's the guy that's a janitor and he's there with his sweeping brush and he's looking at all these obvious weightlifting gurus and he looks relatively small compared to them. And he's there and they always dismiss him, they laugh at him, and then he goes up and he lifts this massive piece of weight. Could you behave like that when you first meet a candidate? Could you be someone who doesn't look like the business owner to see how you're treated by a potential candidate? Or could you ask another member of staff to see how they treated them? Ask them questions about that person. Because these are the times when they're not, if you like, on their best behavior. They're not guarded in their approach at these times. You want to make sure that what you're seeing is what you're going to get later down the line. If you set tasks, such as bringing the required evidence as a means of assessing their ability to follow simple instructions. If you told them to bring a copy of their driving license, have they brought it? These are simple things so you can measure, are they able to follow simple instructions, whether that be written or verbal? And you always use the same pre-prepared questions for every candidate. Score them objectively and remember, understand why you're asking that question. So I'll just give you one very brief example. So if you ask every candidate what are their strengths or weaknesses, and you might even add a little bit to that, and how do you combat them or what steps do you take to prevent your weaknesses becoming a problem? You've just added a little bit extra flavor to that question. But what is that question really about? What you're looking for there is whether or not that candidate is self-aware, because you might value that in your person specification, what I call the picky person profile. You want someone to be aware of their weaknesses and how they're going to work on them, as well as aware of their strengths and how they would like to work on their strengths, because that's the tendency. Actually, we're better off working on our weaknesses. But that's one reason for asking that question. And it's amazing the sort of responses you get when you ask that question, because some people are totally unaware. They have no self-awareness. They talk endlessly about their strengths and don't mention their weaknesses. So that's just one example of the number of questions that I said previously. So remember, ask everyone the same question and score them objectively. Now, the next thing you can do at an interview, and always let them know in advance that you're going to do this, that you can set them a practical task. If we're recruiting for a diagnostic technician, we always use a simple diagnostic dilemma. because it can often reveal more than just competence. You learn to look at their process, how they approach a problem, not just whether or not they can get to the result. Because let's be fair, it's a very stressful situation. But if you make out, that it's just a simple fault, we're just looking to see how you operate, give them, as I always do, I always give them a non-self-ranging multimeter to see if they even know which range to go to. It can tell you a whole load of stuff about someone without actually going into the detail of the test. You can make the test so blindingly simple that everyone passes it. But what you're really observing is how they go about it. Other things to consider, as other than practical tests, are personality tests, and always compare results with observed behaviors and the answers to your questions. Because remember, anyone can look good on an application form, especially with the ChatGPT and other AIs out there. You can construct the perfect answer for a form, but it's when you start asking them questions, what you're going to see is, are they congruent with their written answer? Remember, you'll have that in front of them. If they've applied for loads of jobs, they probably can't remember what they put on from forms, and they will revert to type under pressure. Finally, once you've narrowed it down to maybe one or two candidates, or even just one, there's nothing wrong with going for a paid trial day. This is the acid test to find out if they're a good fit within your business and whether they can actually cut the mustard. 1 day, 2 days, whatever it is, make sure you pay them, because they might have to take time off work to do it. But what you're looking at is not only are they good enough at the job, how do they fit in with the rest of the team? And remember, ask everybody else how they felt about that person or working with that person afterwards. It's not just you that has to work with them at the end of the day. Everybody does. So that's during. We'll quickly mop this up. So what we want is, we want to always be observing behaviors and seeing if they're consistent with what they've written down and how they behave, whether they behave differently towards different people. If you can, do a practical task, or you can do personality tests. And always remember, if all else fails, if you really want to take this process along slow, is see if you can get a paid trial day. So once you've done the interview and the paid trial day, you're on to the after situation. This is your probation period, and you can look at some personal development goals. So where you can, use the legal framework to protect yourself from going straight into a permanent contract. Have a probation period. Obviously, get proper HR advice, get the contract written out correctly. And what you want to do is, once officially on board, outline obvious objectives that they need to fulfill during their probation period, and set simple, specific success standards during that onboarding process. You do have an onboarding process. That's a training topic that we've done before. It's about, how do you welcome people into your business? Typically, there's a space for your toolbox and there's your first job. That isn't an onboarding process. Make sure you've got one. Make sure they know it, everything is, and that they're comfortable. It could take up to maybe a week to get them fully on board. And once you've done that, you can then start outlining their obvious objectives. To how you're going to monitor them. You need to have regular review routines and calendar consistent catch-up periods. So you're going to have a formal weekly, then fortnightly, then probably monthly review with the new candidate to find out how it's going. And you can discuss personal development goals as well as their performance goals that you've set them, their success criteria, if you like. To be a star employee, you need to be hitting these particular targets and see how they're going against them. Now, it's not implausible at this stage that they're going to feel under incredible pressure. So you probably want to ramp this up slightly and let them know what the ultimate target is, but give them a chance to find their feet within your business and find out whether they fit. All the while, keep observing how they are behaving. And this is a chance to detect a star performer that needs a little bit more nurturing. And what you're going to have is a continuous coaching culture. Because once the probation period is over, you need to confirm this with them and then move to quarterly reviews. But you keep the same process going, because if they're used to it with your business, It's easy to keep this going. If the candidate has not met the required standards, this is the opportunity to fire fast or persevere. Yeah. Set another probation period as long as that's legal and right to do so in your place of operation. So what is the atomic action for this training topic? The first thing you need to do, if you haven't already got them, is detailed job descriptions and person specifications for any of the roles you expect to recruit for. Then develop and have a prepared interview routine. Discover what questions you need to ask for the different roles to get sure you select the right person. Have that picky person profile, and then always have a probation period written into the contract. And if you in any doubt about contracts and any of that stuff, always seek professional advice from an HR consultant. If I've helped you understand a little bit more about hiring slow but firing fast, then I've probably done my job. Remember, if you should, you must. And I hope to see you again soon. Cheerio.